Okay, so you can probably see I've gotten the blade pretty close to the mouth. Try to give you a close up. You see it's about half a millimeter or so, but it's basically really close to the mouth, but not actually protruding, because now you want to actually flatten the sole and tune, or kind of, get the hollows in. So the first step you need is obviously to have your plain blade in. I've put my chip breaker in here, but you don't actually need to. And you actually need to tune this if you haven't already. I'll show you that in a little bit later. But you want to have your plane in its kind of final state, minus chip breaker. So here I have a metal plate. This is about, I think, 12 or 13 millimeters thick. A kind of a milled flat plate. You can use thick glass. Make sure you actually do use thick glass, because the thin glass, I think anything under about 10 millimeters will actually flex if you don't have a support under it. So get something thick and sturdy. If you do use thin glass, use something flat underneath, like I don't know, a sheet of thick MDF or plywood or something, and make sure it's secured to that. And all I've done is I've stuck some 320 grit. This is silicon carbide, but you can use any sandpaper. I've just used some spray glue and stuck that on there. You don't want to use double-sided tape, because double-sided tape has thickness, and you'll find that that thickness actually does make a difference when you go to flatten the sole. So I'd recommend, if you do actually use double-sided tape, make sure you get an even coating all along your sandpaper. Otherwise you'll get kind of ridges and stuff in it. Spray glue is probably the quickest and easiest way to do it. I use 3M55. This is a kind of a weak spray glue. It's removable, so it doesn't leave a mess. I've tried, like, I think it was 77 or something, but it's basically way too strong, and it's a complete pain to get off. You can also buy the sandpaper rolls with the kind of glue already on them. They're a good choice, but it's hard to find wide enough rolls for the width of your plane, especially if you have a larger plane like this. And they also have a pretty strong glue on them, so after a while they become really kind of hard to rip off without leaving a whole bunch of glue residue. So spray glue is probably your best bet, and it's also cheap. So blade in, and so the first thing you want to do is to flatten the sole. Now, when you actually do flatten, all you're looking for is an even strip of contact here and at the toe here. Maybe at the back, depending on how you're tuning your plane. I will actually be having a 3 contact point plane, so I'll need 3 kind of even strips here. You don't have to worry too much about area here or here, because they'll eventually be scraped away anyway, so keep that in mind. And basically you just want to lightly kind of pull the plane as you would basically use it. It's pretty simple. Don't put too much pressure on, and don't put any weird kind of uneven pressure. Just keep things nice and even and slow for now. So I'm just taking a few strokes there, and I can see here I have a lot of contact back here. This is because with the plane protruding out, this has created a kind of a bulge here at the back. So this is getting abraded away first. I also got some abrasion marks here. I don't think I have a few at the toe here, but nowhere else. So I'm just going to keep going. Taking a few rough passes now, because I know I have quite a bit of materials with me. You don't have to use this method of flattening your sole. If you have another plane, you can use that, and that will be perfectly fine. But this is a nice, easy way for a beginner, and also doesn't require much in the way of skill. So this is a good method if you're not so confident with a plane. Okay. And actually, I've got pretty even contact all around where I need. That's actually pretty good. So I'm just going to give it a few more kind of light passes. But when you actually get close, you'll actually feel kind of suction to your surface, which I can feel here. And that means you're actually getting kind of pretty much flat. You can actually do fine kind of tuning later, so don't stress over it too much here. So that's about done. So that's the kind of flattening done now. Everything should be flat with your contact strips where you need them. So the next thing we want to do is to take out these hollows here, and I'll show you that. Okay, so here's the plane. I've got it clamped up now, and this is basically how it was from the end of the sandpaper. And I've taken a square and I've scribed a few guidelines here. I'm going to make this a 3-point touch, as I said earlier. And this front section here is about a 9mm strip. The area in here in front of the mouth is about 6, and the ear here about on the back here is also about 6mm. So I've just drawn these kind of guidelines, and that shows me where to scrape. Now, in terms of scraping, you have a few choices. The traditional choice is to have a scraper plane, like so, and you basically traverse across the grain like this, taking small shavings. This is probably what is traditional, and it's probably the favoured choice, I guess. But if you don't have a scraper plane, you can also use a wide chisel, or you can use a cabinet scraper. This is a really thin, flexible one, so it's kind of suited for fine finish type work. And this has been kind of polished, etc., to produce kind of really fine shavings. Then if you can see it's kind of almost like dust. Yeah. And this is what I'll be showing you how to use this time around, because for the most of you, this is probably a more common thing to have around the shop. Now, the other thing you'll need is a straight edge. This is a 30cm long one, and this is used to check the concavity and also the flatness. Now, the first thing you want to do is to check across here on all these points to make sure that these are actually all kind of flat from your sandpaper. If they're not, correct them either with scraping or more sandpapering, and make sure you get them kind of flat first. Next thing you want to check for is you go diagonal, and you want to see what the state of your sole is. From the sandpaper, you may not have a perfectly flat surface, so get a straight edge and check under here against the light and see if you have any kind of irregularities. And you're basically aiming for 3 points, or in the terms of my example, but you want the contact points on your edge, your straight edge, to be how many of points you've decided on. So I'm looking for 3. And you should have a very slight concavity in the region of, 0.12mm, I think, for fine finish work. If you're looking for slightly rougher work, then 0.5mm or so. That's pretty kind of deep. But you only want a tiny sliver of light on these concavities. I'll try to give you a shot of that when I've actually finished tuning this up, so you can see what kind of level of light leakage you're looking for. So that'll give you a good idea. And you want to check in multiple places across here like this, and across like that, etc. And check to see what your plain sole actually is looking like. After you've determined where you need to scrape off, basically what you're aiming for is, again, these 3 strips, or 2 strips, to be perfectly flat across and parallel. The most important thing being this part right next to the mouth here. You want this to be, basically, when you get your straight edge across here, you want that contact point here to be right up against the end of this kind of mouth line. This is kind of important because basically that's what's stopping your, well, it helps to stop tear out, and if you kind of don't make that meet nicely and crisply against there, you'll kind of have a little bit of a problem. It's not super critical, but it's nice to have that kind of touching there nicely. So with your scraper, you basically just want to take very fine passes, depending on where you think you need to take your material. First off, you probably want to just take full passes like this, all the way along, and kind of just slightly relieve this concave area. Okay, and back here as well. Okay, so that's all I'm going to be taking off this pass. So this is the kind of level of material you'd be taking off per pass, and again it's the same kind of process all the way back here. You know, you keep straightening, and you basically just keep checking with the straight edge and scraping away wherever you need. This area here, this kind of behind the mouth line but kind of on the side of the blade here, you see a lot of planes with these kind of like chiseled grooves here. They're only there because when you take your scraper plane and you try to scrape, because basically you want to relieve everything from the mouth line back, which includes these two side points. And if you had your scraper plane here and you're trying to do that, if you didn't relieve these areas, your blade, because your scraper plane sole, unless you relieved it like I have here, with these kind of bells, so that you get basically like a, what do you call it, like a rabbit type plane. This sole will ride against this this strip in front of the mouth, and your plane will tend to kind of tip like this, so you won't actually get a nice shaving right up to this tip, this edge. That's why people relieve this area, so they don't have to scrape that area, so they can have their plane come back here a bit, and the sole won't ride up on here. So you get an unobstructed kind of area here, so you can scrape nicely here. Now if you're using a cabinet scraper, you don't need to do that, and I've actually found that I don't like these kind of notches. I've done it on a few of my planes and I don't like how they handle. They just feel a bit weird to me when actually shaving, so I tend to not cut these notches out. And with this type of scraper plane, you shouldn't have any problem getting right up to the edge there. If you're using a cabinet scraper, then you won't even need to notch, because you can just scrape right up here like this. Just take your time and you should be able to, you know, relieve this area nicely. In any case, if you go slightly over this line and kind of relieve into this area, that's not a problem, because you know, your blade's not actually there. As long as the blade, the kind of the mouth where your blade is, as long as that's nice and flat and straight and even, you should be fine. So you basically keep continue doing that. Before I continue though, these kind of contact points, traditionally for a finishing plane, they have two contact points, one at the front here, one at the back. All this back area here is scooped out, so there's no contact whatsoever. For the kind of the jointer type planes, the truing type planes, there's either two or three, so two here and one at the back, or four strips with an extra one here, just behind the mouth. These are kind of traditionally the jointer planes, etc. They're kind of the more sort of planes for making a flat surface. And actually, kind of recently, I think, in the Kizurokai kind of meetings, etc., there have been people with 3-point touches, even for kind of the fine, super fine work. I actually prefer the 3-point to the 2-point type planes, because when you get to the end of the wood, you kind of have a tendency to rock the plane if you don't have this final one here, and you kind of create some weird kind of almost like kind of chips on the end of your board sometimes if you're not careful. There's also no reason why you can't do super fine work with the 3-touch plane. The only reason I think for 2-touch planes is because a 3-touch plane has basically more, you need a higher tolerance of surface flatness to get a nice shaving. The 2-touch plane, you can, because it's a smoothing plane, you're not actually trying to aim for flatness. You just kind of localized sort of smoothing of boards, etc. That's kind of what you're actually aiming to do. So this kind of allows you, it's effectively a shorter sole size. So you know, it can handle slight irregularities a bit better than if you had a 3-point touch. I prefer 3-point touch because, as I said earlier, it's just, for me, it's easier to handle. But you can still do fine work with this, as I'll hopefully show you when I do actually take some shavings. So, you know, it's up to you basically, but I aim for 3-point touch on pretty much all my planes. So I'm just going to continue scraping like this and continually checking for the state of my sole, and I'll get back to you when I've done this, and I'll show you hopefully the amount of light you should be looking for after you've gotten a tuned up sole. Okay, so I finished kind of scraping, and this might be hard to show, but this is the kind of gap I've got. You can see there. But it's a pretty small gap, and this is kind of what you're looking for, really, this kind of a gap. So with the sole tuned up now, you want to attend to the chip breaker. Now, to do this, it's pretty much similar to how you did the blade. So with the blade tapped in kind of fully, or basically the same as how you had it for when you tuned the sole, you place the chip breaker in the cavity, and what you're checking for is the clearance on these side walls with respect to this kind of chip breaker width here. You can actually put some either oil or graphite along these 2 edges, insert it, and if you have a tight fit, you should be able to see some marks on the side walls, and you basically just pare them down with a chisel. There's nothing much more to it than that. You don't want to make this cavity in here too wide, so this is too loose, but you want to give it some wiggle room so you can kind of adjust it. There's not really much to it other than that for the width. The other thing you want to check for is the fit of your chip breaker. This shouldn't be too loose or too tight. If it's too tight, then basically your chip breaker will wedge right up against your blade, and it will distort the edge as you kind of tap it down, which is not such a good thing. If it's too loose, then obviously it can work loose while in use, and that's obviously no good. You can tweak the fit. First, you want to check that your chip breaker actually sits in there nicely, so check the width, and you want to tap it in, and you should be able to see, you can see I've got this kind of like scratch from the rod here pressing against the chip breaker. You basically want that contact point to be in the middle, roughly here. If you have contact either on the sides here or some unevenness, take a file and file the offending areas on the rod. You don't have to go crazy, but you basically just want the pressure to be on the middle here, so that gives a good even pressure on the blade as it's kind of tapped down. If this is too tight, you can file away these 2 points here, again making sure that your chip breaker sits flat on your blade, but you can keep filing them away or either hammering down the bent tips here so that it slides down and kind of sits nicely without too much pressure. If it's too loose, then again you can hammer down these corners so that it gives a bit more of an angle, and so it's tighter. There's not, unfortunately, this plane was pretty much perfect as it came. It's not too tight, not too loose, nice contact on the middle here, and the width in this cavity is just right. So unfortunately I can't show you that, but it is a really simple process, and you know, it's just a matter of fine-tuning every now and then. For the fit you're looking for, you basically want to drop your chip breaker down, and you want it to come in about maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 millimeters from the actual blade edge. Then you can kind of like tap it down with a hammer and it will slightly tighten up as you go down. You know, I'll try to. So I don't know if you can kind of judge by the sound of that, but that's the kind of pressure I needed. And you can hear there wasn't many taps I needed to actually get this down. So this is pretty close to the edge now of the blade. Once you get to this step, it's almost ready to use. The next thing is to basically really fine tune your bed, like in the earlier steps, to try to get the blade to protrude very slightly. Again, keep checking. And you can actually, if you've got it within 0.5 millimeter, you can probably just give it a few more slightly harder taps and your blade will probably protrude. So I would actually leave it at that. But if you prefer a looser fit, take a couple more shavings off the bed and you know, get it to protrude. Over time, die do actually loosen up because with the blade putting constant pressure against the wood compresses and stuff. So try to aim for a slightly tighter fit than you would actually normally want in real use, because you know, once this is loosened up after a couple of years or whatever, the only way you can tighten up again is to basically pad up the bed. So it's better to start off a bit tight, and if it does prove to be a bit too tight, then you can always shave down the bed a little bit later. So this is basically, this is almost protruding, but I'm not sure, but yeah, there's literally no mouth opening here. So the next step is to cut the mouth. So hang on, let me remove the blade. So with the blade removed, you just basically want to take a chisel and slowly pare away. Hang on, let me get a chisel. Take a nice thin chisel and basically, I don't know if you can see this, take tiny shavings. Like so. It doesn't take much, so be careful. If you're not so confident with a chisel, etc., maybe try using a file or something. This is end grain, so you have to make sure that your chisel is very sharp. Okay, that's probably a good enough start. So pare it open a little bit. Try to maintain that angle of that front area here, because that's where the chips come out. Okay. Okay, so I have pretty much a little bit more. A little bit more to go. So, but that's the general process. You know, just keep going, but take it very slowly, because you don't want to open this up too much. Because obviously, once you've opened this up too much, then you know, you can't really go back. So anyway, I'm going to keep going at this. I won't bore you with it, but it's just a process of kind of taking very light shavings across here. Try to keep it even. It doesn't have to be even, but it's obviously nicer if it is even. And I'll come back once I've done that, and hopefully you should be able to show you some shavings. Okay, so I've got the mouth cut here, and I don't know if you can actually see, but it's pretty tight and even all the way down. See if I can get you a shot down here. Which is it? You can see that. Some light peeking through there. It's a pretty tight mouth, but it's better to have it too tight than obviously too loose. So I finished kind of scraping the sole, and let's give you some focus here. So I finished scraping the sole, and to kind of help you scrape, you can take a few test shavings of some wood, and you should get some burnished areas basically over the sole, and you're aiming for basically some burnished strips where you want them. So in my case 3 strips, and you don't want any burnished areas in here. So if there are any burnished areas in these kind of hollow areas where you're supposed to be scraping, just take a cabinet scraper or some kind of a wideish chisel and carefully scrape those burnished areas away, and you should be left with a tuned plane. Now this is some hinoki, which is some Japanese, I think cypress or something, but this is the kind of level I've taken the tuning to. So you can see there's some shavings, pretty fine, kind of like spider's webs almost. Now you can see a problem here is that it's not actually holding together. And that's mainly probably because my blade hasn't been perfectly honed. This kind of level of shaving you'd probably never take in real use, but I like to try to aim for this kind of a level of shaving when I'm tuning, because it's a good indication that when you actually advance the blade for more realistic kind of thicknesses, you'll get a nice clean kind of shaving. So some slightly thicker ones there. I'll try to advance this a bit and see what happens. So a slightly more coherent shaving there. Advance a bit more. You can actually hear I'm not actually advancing this very much. So yeah, this is the kind of levels of shaving I've gotten to. So you know, you can see it's not a very hard process really. The steps are simple, and as long as you pay attention to what you're actually doing, take things easy, you should be able to get a very usable plane at the end of it, as evidenced by these shavings. If I actually wanted to take kind of really super thin shavings with this, kind of micron level like the Kezurokai guys, I'd have to chase down the blade sharpness, the honing. I'd have to really pay attention to that. Basically everything on the plane will have to be sort of tuned to the absolute max, because when you're taking single digit micron thickness shavings, basically any kind of tiny deviations, you know, of a few microns basically in your sole flatness, or the you know, the kind of the twist, etc., the blade flatness and the sharpness, any tiny nicks there, they'll all show up in the shavings. So you know, you can basically spend forever trying to tune these things to that competition level. I you know, typically don't go that far when tuning. You know, I only usually go for the sort of more realistic kind of thicknesses basically, although I do try to kind of get as close to that target of single digit micron thickness shavings as I actually can, without spending too much time obviously. You know, once you get to this kind of level of shaving, you can be pretty certain that your plane will be able to do very good finishing work for you. You can notice here that I don't actually have the chip breaker in. It's because I don't actually need it. I typically only put the chip breaker in and use it when I find I get some tear out, which I can't solve with a freshly sharpened blade, and everything with tight tolerances. So it's only basically as a last resort. Chip breakers, they weren't really a part of a Japanese plane until quite recently, basically. So, and they're more of an aid for kind of beginners who couldn't handle single-bladed planes. So they're not absolutely needed, but they certainly do help if you're not so confident in your tuning up, etc. So this is pretty much all there is to tuning up a kanna, a Japanese plane. Last thing to do is basically clean up your plane, give it down a wipe down with some oil or something. Not for protection, but to actually get the marks of the graphite off. I typically use camellia oil again. Just give a light coat of that, kind of, just to take these graphite marks you may have on there and just clean it up, basically. So yeah, this is pretty much tuned. You can basically not expect to have a fully tuned plane basically for the whole, of its lifetime. You have to maintain it, and you'll have to revisit mainly the sole flatness and this kind of hollow, especially if you live in an area of kind of wide humidity changes. Japan has quite a sort of harsh changes from winter to summer. There's pretty dramatic changes, so these die do typically need quite a bit of tuning over the years. But it's only a very quick process, as you can see. It's very simple, and it shouldn't be too much of an extra hassle compared to, say, like a metal plane. So hope you found this series useful, and hope you can get some nice shavings from your kanna when you tune it up. If you have any questions, etc., feel free to either message me on YouTube or whatever, or leave something in the comments. I'll try to get back to you. But yeah, that's it for the series. So good luck with your tuning, and have fun.